Welcome back to Top 5. The city was alive with the night's pulse, the neon lights flickering against the darkened skyline, an ominous backdrop for the inevitable clash. In a shadowed alley, Frank Castle, known to most as the Punisher, adjusted his combat gear, readying himself for another grim night on the streets. He wasn't just another vigilante, he was an instrument of vengeance, fused with a singular purpose, to exterminate those who preyed upon the innocent. However, he wouldn't have the night to himself. Billy Butcher, the ruthless leader of the boys, had caught wind of Frank's operations, and a violent confrontation was all but guaranteed. Butcher had his own score to settle, a hatred for anyone who wielded power unchecked. The two men, instigators of chaos, were drawn together like moths to a flame, but unbeknownst to the Punisher, he wouldn't be alone for long. As Castle scanned the shadows, the grim silence of the alley was broken by the shuffling of footsteps. Without warning, Butcher and his crew emerged, their laughter twisted and sinister. Huey Campbell, Mother's Milk, Frenchie, and Kimiko Miyashiro flanked Billy, their eyes glinting with malicious intent. "Look who we have here, the great Punisher himself," Billy sneered, stepping forward. "Gonna clean up the streets, Frank? Let's see how well you do against the boys." Before Frank could react, Billy lunged, brandishing a modified combat knife, a silver gleam catching the light. Frank twisted away just in time, the blade slicing through the air where he had stood moments before. "Is this how you want to play?" Frank growled, his voice low and menacing, as he pulled out his sidearm, firing off 2 rounds in quick succession. The bullets ricocheted off a nearby dumpster, narrowly missing Huey, who yelped and ducked. The ensuing chaos saw Butcher and his gang leap into action. Billy charged again, adrenaline pumping through his veins as he grappled with Frank, their muscular forms colliding against the brick wall. Frank retaliated, elbowing Butcher in the gut before bringing his knee up hard into Billy's stomach. The blow forced air from Butcher's lungs, but he quickly recovered, throwing a vicious hook that landed squarely on Frank's jaw. The fight spiraled into brutality as both sides exchanged blows, with Frank using the narrow alley to his advantage, pushing Billy back. He ducked under swipes and slashed knife attacks, his training evident as he maintained a relentless pace, blood beginning to smear their surroundings. "Come on, is that all you've got, Butcher?" Frank taunted, spitting blood, his grin a vicious snarl just before throwing another kick that landed against Billy's side, sending him stumbling against the wall. Butcher grimaced but quickly regained his stance, pulling out a pistol of his own. With a smirk, he fired, missed, but followed up with a wicked laugh that echoed in the alleyway. "I'm just warming up." However, the fight took an unexpected turn when Frank's instincts, honed through years of combat, alerted him to movement behind him. Bathed in darkness, Butcher's crew began to close in, entrapping Frank in a deadly triangle. In a desperate bid to regain control, Frank whipped around and fired, but was met with the hectic shouts of Frenchie and Kimiko. "Gotta love the odds," Frenchie grinned, pulling a grenade from his vest, only to have Kimiko swiftly knock it from his hands, her deadly precision shattering the moment. An explosion would have been too kind. The chaos intensified, with punches flying, weapons drawn, and onlookers in the streets fleeing in terror. The alley was a symphony of violence, punctuated by grunts of pain, the sharp pop of gunfire, and the occasional dark humor amidst the beating. "Ever considered a new career, Frank?" Billy taunted, peppering Frank with questions while dodging bullets, his knife glimmering dangerously. "Maybe pottery?" "Yeah, but I'd rather break kneecaps than make flower pots," Frank shot back, landing a brutal uppercut that spun Butcher around. Blood splattered across the wall as they continued in this lethal dance. Just as it seemed that Frank was gaining the upper hand, Butcher called out to his crew, and in a coordinated frenzy, they lunged, tackling Frank to the ground. The breathing space he had fought for vanished, and he felt the pressure of bodies bearing down on him. But in this moment of chaos, the skies opened, and with a roar, Venom, sinewy and monstrous, crashed into the fray alongside Elektra, who wielded her sai with deadly grace. The tide turned in an instant as Venom's vicious jaws snapped inches from Mother's Milk's face, sending him careening into the alley's brick wall and out of the fight. Elektra, a whirlwind of lethal efficiency, danced through the gang, her moves artful and deadly, as she sliced through Huey and Frenchie with pinpoint strikes, the air rushing with the tension of her every motion. "Hey, Butcher! Nice of you to invite us to the party." Venom growled, his voice a low rumble, as he grabbed Kimiko, throwing her into a dumpster with a force that made her head ring. "Let's wrap this up." Frank roared, his focus back on Butcher, who had nearly regained his footing. They clashed once more, fists flying, bodies colliding in a grotesque ballet of violence. With every punch, Frank's strength began to wane, but he landed a decisive blow that sent Billy to his knees. "This ends now," Frank snarled, eyes narrowing, aiming his weapon at the fallen Butcher. "Not so fast." Butcher sneered, pulling a flash drive from his jacket with trembling fingers. "Compound V, dare to see what it does?" With desperation fueling him, Billy injected himself, veins pulsating as strength surged through him. Billy growled ferociously and hurled himself at Frank with newfound vigor, the rage igniting the fight into a new level of carnage. "Welcome to my world." Butcher howled, leaping at Frank. Their bodies crashed against one another, fists roaring like thunder. Venom and Elektra took down the remaining boys but kept one eye on the frenzied fight at hand. "Looks like I'm not the only one enjoying this dance." Elektra called out amid her flurry of combat, dispatching Huey effortlessly before looking over at Frank and Billy, who were trading blows once more. Frank's mind raced, he had to end this before it escalated further. Using his environment, Frank darted between the debris as Billy lunged, slamming into a wall that crumbled under their steam. "Just admit it, Butcher. You threw your lot in with the wrong players." Bloodied but unyielding, Billy countered, "I'm just getting started." With one final effort, Frank gained the upper hand and was on the verge of clamping a chokehold around Billy's neck when the sound of screams erupted around them. Pedestrians were caught in the crossfire, innocent victims of a battle that shouldn't have spilled onto the streets. But as Frank tightened his grip, Billy's eyes darted around. Seeing his crew taken down one by one, he pushed Frank back momentarily and grabbed a nearby shard of glass, slashing wildly. Frank twisted just in time to evade most of the strike but felt a sting of pain across his cheek. But this time, Frank wouldn't let himself falter. With one swift movement, he pinned Billy down, straddling him as the adrenaline pumped hard in his veins. "Enough," he barked, fists raining down, blood spraying like paint across the battered pavement. The alley was a brutal battlefield, shattered glass, discarded weapons, and broken bodies filling the space once occupied by dark laughter and prideful mockery. "Never thought I'd die like this, Castle," Billy wheezed, a mix of blood and bitterness pooling across the asphalt. Laughter choked him as he spat, "Makes me wish I had a better villain to go down against." "You chose this life," Frank replied, unwavering, preparing to deliver the final blow, "and this is what it cost you." With a final, pained grunt, Frank brought his fist down hard, then pulled back. The monster known as Billy Butcher slumped, defeated, with the streets trembling under the weight of his choices. As the dust settled and sirens wailed in the distance, Frank rose, bloodied and bruised but intact. The city around him continued to thrive in its darkness, unaware of the terror that had just played out in its depths. Venom and Elektra moved back into the shadows, allowing Frank the moment of silence he hadn't known he needed. "Guess it's not a bad night after all," Frank murmured, walking away from the carnage, the darkness of the night wrapping around him like an old lover.